Hey everybody, thank you for coming. My name is Fredrik, I'm with Bitwig, and this is our Gesprächskonzert SUPERBOOTH 2024. I'm wearing the perfect t-shirt for the YouTube thumbnail clickbait viral pattern. As you can see, it's 10 years of Bitwig we're celebrating, so do come by the booth and say hello and give us a high five or a slap or whichever you prefer. I did a Gesprächskonzert last year where I showed how I perform live using Bitwig Studio and some modular stuff. The Gesprächskonzert this year is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to talk about production techniques. And the idea was to have 10 techniques in 10 minutes because it just sounded catchy. And when I started to actually consider which techniques I wanted to show, they kind of grew and went weird places. So I don't know if I'm going to keep it at 10 or not. Maybe one of you guys can keep count, because I'm not going to be able to, because I'm going to be busy. And when I did kind of the trial run yesterday, I managed to show half of my stuff in 25 minutes. So it's going to be a tight ride. I'm going to break the Gesprächskonzert format a little bit. Typically they say, okay, 10 minutes of talking, showing, 10 minutes of performance. I'm going to mix it up a little bit and show something and then perform shortly with that something. And it's going to be a mix of two things, right? Oh, I forgot my notes. Haha. Right, so these are all techniques that I use in my own productions a lot. It's a combination of software and hardware, which is something that Bitwig Studio does really well. I'm sure you can do it also in your own DAW, so apply where possible. It turns out when I actually started fooling around with this that it's a lot of sequencing happening, so I guess it's something like 10 sequencing techniques, which is suitable because Bitwig Studio is a sequencer, and actually it turns out that I really like to sequence the sequencer using hardware sequencers. So yeah, just bear with me, we're going to be on a little journey here, and I'm going to start with something rather trivial, and I'm also going to time myself here. We're officially already started, but I'm going to put it at 20 minutes from now, so let's see what happens. Right, I like to use the clip launcher and the arrangement timeline together quite a lot. So let me just start this little beat, this fat beat I got going here. Okay, it's just a very, very, very basic bass line going, or bass drum. And I'm playing this little note clip here from the timeline. That's my main kick. And I have the same in the clip launcher, which is just a little note pattern. And what I like to do is just create variations in the clip launcher. I'm just going to duplicate this, call this my fill 1. And I can even give it a different color, that way I can see it nicely in the timeline. And let me just shuffle things around here just a little bit. Very simple stuff. Create a new duplicate, call it fill 2. And again, change a few notes, change places on random more or less. And let's create a third one, call it fill 3. And let's move this first one, move there, and this one there, and then, and right. So now I have, shall we say, a repository of fill patterns that I can then use throughout my projects, which is something that I typically do at the end of my arrangement because it's pretty boring to work with kick fills, but this is a nice way of doing it. So I'm just gonna drag stuff from the clip launcher into the timeline, as you see, on like kind of key places, and even if I'm hiding my clip launcher and might be somewhere completely different in my project, I can just open this up, and here I have access to a quote-unquote pool of clips. Moving on, so down below here I have a drum machine filled with hats, and I'd like to show a few sequencing tricks here. Let's create a clip. And I can, of course, as you just saw me do, create and paint blocks like this. Okay, we're getting somewhere already. And let's make a variation of that. And let's say, okay, I want to have a fast hat on top of that. I can, of course, again, paint out the notes, as you saw me do. Well, actually, let me do that first. I'm holding the Alt key on my keyboard, and I can just drag out 16 notes. Okay, that's pretty standard, but let's do something else. Let's use something called operators. And I'm gonna zoom in here to my inspector panel with the note selected. It was a long one. And I'm gonna activate the repeat. So out of one note, I get 4 repeats. It sounds like that. I can create more or less weird in between. If you wanna be a little bit arty, this is a fine way to do that. Okay, I have my 16th note. Let's say I want to add this hi-hat on top. And this is a 4. And true to my way of doing things. Actually, this is a bit annoying. Let's move this up here. Yeah, you get the idea. So just by grabbing a couple of notes and adding a couple of operators, I can get moving patterns going. So let's try a different operator. So we have our little open hi-hat here again. Just gonna go ahead and add a few notes here. Select those, and we're gonna give it a chance. And again, in our operator corner, I can drag this down here, and you see these little dices moving here when I do so. So I give this a chance of 60% of happening. And you'll see kind of the outlines of the notes changing depending on if they are happening or not, and that's calculated per cycle of the clip. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. We've programmed a couple of drums in the box. A few of you have probably done this in the past. There are other ways to do program drums, and that is from the hardware world, and that's something that I like to do a lot. And to do that, we look at the third track, which is a drum machine again with a couple of percussion sounds. It's a bit low, maybe I gain it a bit. Yeah, that'll do. Now, how do we program those using the hardware world? So first of all, on the hardware side, I have my Turing machine, and this is what I want to use to generate kind of semi-random shifting drum patterns. And this one accepts a clock. I have to send it a clock, otherwise it won't do anything. I have my handy Neo Trinity module here, which is clock source, if you will, that is in turn clocked by Bitwig Studio. And from the Turing machine, I want to send out pulses to trigger stuff. So I'm going to use my input from the audio interface here for pulse. But I also want to play different drums, so I'm going to use the out here to play kind of random drums, and that's my pitch input for a second. On the computer again, I'm going to go ahead and create a note grid patch on the fly in front of an audience. And this is actually quite simple. It's a pretty simple patch. I've connected stuff to the input on the audio interface, so I need to grab that somehow. And I have the hardware in module for that, for instance. And here I select input 1. That's my gate. I'm connecting that to the gate module here to generate notes. And let's duplicate that and select input 2 and connect that to pitch. And let's see what happens when I hit play. So, we are receiving audio from hardware in, and they are generated as gates here. You'll see that flashing a little bit. We're not getting any notes at this point. I'll have to figure out why. And we're getting a signal in from the gate, which is kind of a random feed from the Turing machine. Now, we're not getting any signal, which is kind of strange. I was expecting to have notes playing. In German, they call it the Vorführ effect. The demo effect is that whenever you try to do something in front of someone else, it just has to fuck up. But I know why, because I didn't put the grid patch to mono. So, there we go. Phew! You'll see kind of like blinking little yellow lights here on the screen, and those are the notes happening. And if you know the drum machine, you know that these notes are now too high. That's why we're not hearing anything. So, instead of going direct in, I'm going to patch this up again. Whoops. Going to patch this through an attenuator, so I can kind of control where the signal is in the pitch register, so to speak. And this is just a way of kind of setting or controlling the signal in different ways. So, if you look at the computer again, when I turn the offset knob here, you'll see that different drum patches are being triggered. Let's give this a little bit more volume so we can actually hear anything. Okay, so what I've done here is I've set the variation to 0, and I've picked the lowest note. So if we start to bring up the variation, we shall see different things being triggered. So we have this kind of semi-random thing happening from the Turing machine, triggering my drum machine in Bitwig Studio. And I think it sounds pretty cool. And let's say I want to capture that to use that in my project. I can't actually record the notes straight in the channel, but what I can do is I can create a new instrument track and kind of fetch the notes from my other track, and I can record that. So let's do a little mini jam take where I capture a note clip. Okay, so our little bright pink friend here, this is a bunch of notes captured in a couple of bars. I can now kind of pick out whichever part I happen to like. Did anyone have a favorite part? And then I can just drag that into my percussion track and launch that. And now it's playing from the note clip instead of from the Turing machine. And of course we want to do variations. All right. I've chained these two together, these two clips. Every 4 bars they will alternate and launch each other, so to speak. And this also means that I can now unpatch this. I can use my ins and outs for other things. So again, forfeit effect, meaning of course I have to delete the grid first. Otherwise the notes are eaten up. But yeah, here we go. Now, one funny thing about Bitwig Studio is that you can have several projects open at the same time. So let's say I have been working on a project last Tuesday and I had some really cool funky drums there that didn't happen or go anywhere, but I can still use the materials. Let's just drag something in here, see what happens. Okay, neat, cool. Another thing one might want to do is to send stuff from Bitwig Studio into the hardware world, and not only program stuff here, but actually audio. So let's set up a hardware audio insert. I'm going to use an available pair of outputs from my audio interface, connect that to a Icaria filter that is in turn connected to a Basil delay, both Basil modules. And that I'm going to send back into my project. So, patched and ready to go. On the software side, let's say, okay, this is the one I want to filter, okay? So a typical thing one might want to do is to add a hardware effects device and give it an output. Output 3, 4 it was, and the input is 1, 2. Okay, so pretty straightforward. I've created a hardware insert, and now I can play with my hardware effects. And that's a standard way of doing it, putting it as an insert in the track. But what if I want to be a little bit more free with what I want to send to my filter? Here's a thing I like to do. Drag that into a send instead, and use the send as my source, if you will. And going back to my drum pattern, if I set the send to pre, I can drag down the volume and send it to send. And I don't have the dry audio, so to speak, in my project anymore. I only have what's coming out here. It also means that I can do the same thing with other tracks. So I've set my percussion machine also to pre-send, and let's send that into the filter. Didn't I have a clock from before? Maybe I can sync that delay, so let's do that. Sync! Yeah. Better. Much better. Now, of course, you're asking, what about modulation? And that's what we're going to do next. Of course, we want to modulate our hardware modules from Bitwig Studio as well. So let's just pick this available output and put that into the mod input of the filter, going back to the software, adding a CV out module, which is just a DC offset knob, more or less. Pick our output 5, and we should now be able to... Yes, we have software control over the hardware knob, and Bitwig Studio comes with a most amazing modulation system. Let's put a steps sequencer in here, and I'm gonna go ahead and put this out. No, I wanted 60 notes, and I want to have bipolar. Now, as you might hear, we're getting a lot of DC noise, for lack of a better word, because the CV-DC is now in the audio signal mixed in, but we can simply hide our device behind a chain device, if that makes sense. And what if you want to modulate the delay instead? Okay, that sounds really weird. But anyways, that's the principle. And I'm running out of time. We can, of course, record that as well. So if I were to hit export on this project, none of that would, of course, come with my file. So I need to record the things. And I like to do that in the clip launcher too. So let's record something. I need to mute the track first, otherwise I'll hear double. And I can launch. I think we'll do it without the delay modulation. Okay, so I have set up a record channel, recording my hardware, and let's just record something. Uh-oh. I'm out of time. The bell rang. So I guess we'll have to stop there. But I think I showed you a couple of techniques that are maybe useful, maybe fun, maybe inspiring, maybe awful. It's really up to you. But that's it from me. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? If there are any. Yeah, I see a gentleman over there.
Just a question, and it might be elementary, but how do you not have latency issues when you are sending the drugs out to the filter and then back in? Is that just the quality and the features of your I/O?
Yeah, so I believe I have a pretty low audio buffer setting at this point in order to do that. If you're working with higher buffer settings, there might be latency. One thing worth noting is that we're only in the audio domain here. There's no MIDI or anything like that, so it's all running in one cycle, so to speak. Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Anyone else? I can't see anything. Oh, yes?
So you're using that extra sleepers for all your conversions back and forth.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the Expert Sleepers ES8 audio interface. This is running all my audio, all my CV and clock and gate and all of the things. Well then, thank you very much again. Have a good one. Cheers.